Yo, I woke up this morning with this beat on my mind. Thinking to myself, I gotta pen these rhymes for the DMV, for everybody to see that DC, Maryland, Virginia is the place to be. I'm from that C station, boy, you probably never heard of it. And if you haven't listened to my lyrics, so you learn a bit. We turning it out without a doubt, we're always burning it.
Yes, sir. Coming back at you. Another session of Val's Monologues. I'm your host, Val Holness, coming at you. Getting it in this late evening. About to be the turn of midnight here in a couple, 30 minutes or so. Excited to to chat with you guys. And if you do want to chat now, we are live. Part of the Answer Game podcast. Let me go ahead and post that to my page. 1 second.
This for my folks ready for the summer. Beltway burning rubber steady undercover. A Mo hit me, said he got the veggies by the number. So we hit the A11, then we hit the parking. Is you sparking? You said nah, then keep it walking. I can't fade this. What's the move? As of the latest, nothing new. Wherever bait is, let's come through. Now hold up, wait, is that them fools? OT, they blow on me though. Thinking they play is bagging brought to the boulevard, but they caught the pop polos on.
It's not letting me set it. Let me try something else.
Speaking of which, yo son, you got the whip, I got a dip and take a trip to the district real quick.
I'll figure it out. Hold on 1 second. Let me go another route. Alright, I'm Jack Turn, willing in a 4-run with your hun and my crew, and we finna eat food DC right on time. Tell them they the truth though. 1 second, y'all.
Right on time, we don't bang with you though. NBA getting to the top, the grind don't stop. Came a long way from ciphers at the spot, but DC
This should
right on
do
time.
it.
We don't know. MD right on time, we kicking in they go. Now everybody, put your hands up. Understood? Now everybody stand up. Alright, good. When I say DMV, y'all say right on time. DMV.
All right, and a little click here. And there we go. I just posted the link to the Answer Game Podcast Facebook page. Again, that's the Answer Game Podcast Facebook page. All you have to do is put that in the search section and you will find us. Go ahead and click that on and you can like us and get some good info like we're going to spit tonight. You know, just have a little fun, you know, after a long day. For those of you who had a long day at the job, you know, just some soothing relaxation, conversation to relax you. Hope you had a good day. Want to send a shout out to the guys that support me, Computer Love. That is Compute with the KOMPUTER love.com. Go there for your computer needs. If you need computer needs fixing, if you need to buy a computer, get in contact with a brother. Also had a nice workout session today at Body by Inches, owned by Mr. Michael Russell. Check him out at www.bbi.com. Has a nice location there, Union City, Georgia. So for those of you who have those workout needs, it's a great place to go. Great guy to know. Want to also let you know that if you need a car, you can contact me with Great Atlanta Auto Service, Great Atlanta Auto and Signing Services for your notary needs as well. You can find us at www.greatatlantasigningservice.com. We'll be getting that auto site up real soon. Excited about the opportunities coming away through the auto business. So any questions you may have, feel free to call me or get in contact with me through the Spreaker site or the Great Atlanta Signing Services website. Excuse me. Again, this is another session of Val's Monologues / Answer Game Podcast. If you want to find us, you can find us on Spreaker.com. That's Spreaker with an R, SPREAKER.com / the Answer Game Podcast or Val's Monologues. Either one would do. Did I leave anything out? Don't know. But I'm coming to you because I had a revelation today. Still hurting a little bit from that Atlanta Falcons loss in the Super Bowl. And I know it's been 5 months now, but I still have the habit of going over the highlights of that game, of the season highlights, because still hurts a little bit that the Falcons didn't win that game. And was pushed to a commercial today that Gatorade just put out. Very interesting commercial. Got me hyped a little bit too. Got me real hyped because it starts off by showing athletes who had major defeats in life, but used those defeats to propel them, to greater success. You had to starts off the Michael Jordans of the world, and they got into J.J. Watt, who I didn't notice he was a walk-on. Started off as a walk-on in college. Everybody knows the story of Michael Jordan, but didn't know that J.J. Watt started as a walk-on in college. Also talked about the starts of Peyton and Eli Manning in the NFL and how disastrous it was for those guys. Then they talked about Serena Williams, and her loss to the unseeded tennis player on her way to a Grand Slam, which prevented her from getting a Grand Slam. I think that match was a fix. It was obvious mismatch, mixed match. But that's neither here nor there. But it ends with showing Matt Ryan, with they showed a whole shot of him walking off the field from the Super Bowl after losing the Super Bowl, and what he's doing now to prepare for the season, using that as fuel for the upcoming season. Now, hopefully, I'm hoping that the team, will use this to go ahead and get it done this year. I believe they have a talent to go undefeated, but that's just my opinion. It's professional sports, where anything can happen. We saw that in the Super Bowl, but I believe they're on the right track, and I say that because of the ownership with Arthur Blanc. He's just the type of guy that does not stand for mediocrity. He really pushes winning, the whole culture of winning. And when you, in any situation where the head is right, whatever the head thinks, that's where the body is going to go. So eventually, these Falcons are going to figure this thing out. But I talk about. I got to researching, those type of underdog stories, and I found an interesting one, and it's close to home because I actually met the guy when I worked for him. This is my second year in the car business, and I left the place I left at the time. Where I got my start in the car business, I knew that if I lasted a year at that place, that I could sell cars anywhere. I mean, it was a total circus. I'm not going to give the name of the place, but it was a total circus. A lot of what you may expect from a place of business was not at that business, let's just say. Man, I saw so many things at that business. And I just knew that I wasn't gonna have a long-term future there, but it was still a good experience because put it this way, I was a piece of meat in the den of wolves, and you know what? I survived. I survived. But the next place I went to was owned by a man named Billy Walters, and I'm not gonna promote the business here on this podcast, but the dealership, I didn't know who the owner was. I just knew, of course, that if you do own one of those type of major dealerships, new car dealerships. You know, you had to have some bread. And Billy Walters owned this particular dealership. Now, you're never going, if you work at his dealerships, you're never going to see him. You might hear about him every now and then, but you're never going to see him because that's the way he sort of lives his life. He's a very private person, from my understanding. And the time I met him, if I didn't know who he was, we would have just passed each other on the street. He was just that subtle in his appearance, in his mannerisms. You know, I specifically remember him walking up to us, him and the manager at the time, one of the I guess the co-owners at the time, walking him up to us. And I was in it was about 3 or 4 of us outside. He's walking up to us at night. He had been, but mind you, he hadn't been supposed to be there during the daytime, but I guess to keep all the attention from coming to himself, he came there during the evening, very unassuming, and it didn't take me 5 seconds to figure out this was a hillbilly. I forget what he said he wanted to do after he left us, but it was nasty. I do remember it was nasty because I remember our facial expressions as he was walking away. Like, this dude is nasty. I forget what it was, but after he met us or whatever, he walked inside, took a tour of the place, and mind you, the place had been up for a year, or I think 9 months, and this was his first time seeing it. And this is obviously one of his, few dealerships that he has now. From my understanding, he owns at a minimum 8 dealerships. I think he owns some more. And I'm getting this from a 60 Minutes piece that was done on him. That's just how big time I realized he was when I saw that 60 Minutes piece. And I invite you to check it out. Just Google or just go to YouTube and put in the search engine Billy Walters 60 Minutes. It's a very interesting 30-minute interview they did of him. And come to find out, he doesn't do interviews. He, like I said, he tries to keep himself out of the spotlight as best as possible. The reason he did that interview per se is because. And I didn't even tell what he does. He got his money from sports gambling, but he's not just any regular sports gambler. He had to have some inside information, but I'll get into that. But he did a 60-minute interview because he wanted to expose the corruption he saw going on in Wall Street, because he mentioned in an interview that being that he is a sports gambler, he says he didn't see, he saw way more thieves in Wall Street than, the people he dealt with in the sports gambling profession. And mind you, this is, he lives in Las Vegas, and, Las Vegas is the hub of, bets, sports bets, any type of betting that outside Las Vegas is illegal, but in Las Vegas is legal, meaning that, you're going to attract the who's who of the underworld, right? Supposedly. But in this case, he was at home. Now, why did I pick Billy Walters? If there was ever an excuse to quit, Billy Walters had many of them, right? First off, he comes from Munfordville, Kentucky, and his mother at the time was a young woman, and from my understanding, by the time she was 17, she had 3 kids. And, with a 17-year-old with 3 kids, you're going to have some issues with maturity. And evidently she was a drinker and she was loose. So, in essence, Billy Walters was raised by his grandmother. Now, being that he had a poor upbringing, and when I say poor, you're born into a family with a 17-year-old mother, a teenage mother, and with who doesn't know, who's loose, and then a grandmother who didn't have a husband at the time. Yeah, you're going to deal with some issues. And in his case, he was on his own at a very early age. From my understanding, he moved out the house when he was 6 and moved back in when he was 13. But by that time, he had learned a few things. His uncle, and I'm trying not to get into too much of his background, because I can, just from the research I've done, I can sit here all night talking about that. But to make a long story short, he learned how to play pool from playing pool at his uncle's pool house, little hole-in-the-wall pool house that he ran. And Walter started playing when he was 5. And says he was good. He became real good when he was 13. And that pretty much is how, he started to make a living for himself by that. But he was also, being that, he started life so young, he had his first child as a teenager. And by the time he was 35, he had been married 3 times with 3 kids. And one of them had a brain tumor and wasn't supposed to live. And, those issues, all those issues caused him, to live a life of drinking and gambling. And they said he was broke so many times. He came home, by the time he was 35, he came home broke at least at a minimum 15 times. One time losing his house while he was married to his second wife over a game of nickels. He actually lost his house to a game of nickels. But from my understanding, he tried so many different things to make a living. Let me pull up the article here. Hold on a second. Let me find it real quick. Let's see. Very interesting to read this article too. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on 1 second. Okay, his occupations included newspaper boy, farmhand, shoe shiner, baker, tobacco worker, foundry worker, I don't know what that is, painter, car dealer, realtor. And it also adds to him, those were mere side jobs. I could relate a lot to this story, a whole lot to this story. But in reference back to Billy Walters, he left Kentucky because he was actually convicted of shady bookkeeping because of his gambling. It relates to his gambling, but they said it was because the records he kept when he owned a used car dealership. When he owned his used car dealership or whatever. So he had to move. He moved to Las Vegas at 35 in debt with his third wife. And he didn't know what he was going to do. Now, this is how he came up. He got linked up with this group called the Computer Group. And I'm not going to get into exactly how they made their money, but to make a long story short, they were organized sports gambling ring, legal organized sports gambling ring that pretty much turned all the line makers in Vegas upside down, turned their business upside down. And it just so happened that the feds came after him. And this was during the 80s. It was so much, man, just thinking about the 80s, it was so much money to be made during that era with, the stuff that was going on Wall Street. You know about, the Wolf of Wall Street. What else? It was something else. It slipped my memory. But this also, the sports gambling. And I figured that the reason this is going on is because this is really before computers came into play or being a big thing. Like the people who owned the computer was way ahead of the game. You know, where now you have households that have 3 or 4 computers. It wasn't too common for people to have a computer, and the people that did have access to a computer really made their money. Like in Walter's instance, with him in that ring, they made their money using one computer that was on the other side of the country. Like this computer was in Maryland, and the ring was separated. It was across the country, but it was an underground ring. And even though it was legal, the Fed still came after them, and they were prosecuted and were not convicted by the FBI. We're not convicted by the FBI, which is which is amazing. And I'm gonna get into the FBI or going to court, because doing research of this, I found out that Billy Walter was actually convicted earlier this year on 10 counts of insider trading. But I'll get into that. But in this instance, in the instance in the 80s, he was not convicted, and he's actually been prosecuted 5 times by the federal government. Shows you how much the feds do not like new money. Well, that's another story. But it's real interesting. It's real interesting to really dwell what this guy had to overcome to get to where he is now, where he's worth over $200 million. And although he's dealing with that conviction this year, he's number one, he's an interesting character. Just by doing reading on him, just by doing research on him. But even though he was convicted this year, his lawyers have found the technicality in the prosecution's case, and the case he was tried. And mind you, this Phil Mickelson was linked to it. For some reason, they let him off. And the other guy was the owner of Dean Farms. I think his name is Tom Davis. But the way the story goes, the reason they were prosecuted is because Tom Davis became an FBI informant, saying that when he got involved with Billy Walters gave him a burner phone for the both of them to communicate, where the FBI says, or the SEC accused them of using that phone to do insider trading on IPO and other stock. Just stock on Dean Farms, from my understanding. And come to find out that the date that Walters gave Tom Davis the burner was a couple years after the alleged incident of insider trading that occurred. So now Walters is going to be tried again. He was able to secure a new trial because of that technicality. So he's surviving. He's 70 years old and he's surviving. Now, I live in a world where, to me right now it's just no good or bad. Is he a good guy? A bad guy? To me, it doesn't matter. What matters to me is that all the issues that he had to overcome, he didn't ask to be born in that situation, but he was. And he used those defeats as fuel to his successes, to his future successes. So hopefully, guys, do your own research on this. I know I'm chopping up a little bit with the points, but it's such an interesting story when you do when you look up this guy. Because like I said, I met him, and he's very unassuming. You know, just a regular guy off the street. But this is a guy that's worth over $200 million. Very astute businessman because, and I know this for a fact, for example, the dealerships that he owns, he does own the dealerships, but the most important thing is he owns the land that the dealerships lie. Because, you know, the car business, I see that, you know, dealerships come and go. But that land is going to be there. And for every one of his purchases, he makes sure to get the land, not just the dealership, but the land that the dealership sits on. And in my case, when I was at the dealership that he owned, when I worked there, I think 6 months into it, a new dealership or a new ownership group came in and bought out the minority. Hold on one second.
Bring it back, put your hands to the sun. Wave them side to side, pump your fist, everyone jump, jump. If your energy is right,
run out of power there. But I know when I was 6 months into my job at that place, a new ownership group came in to buy the majority, not majority, but the minority partners out. And their plan was to do a lot of expansion on that street that they were on. So they bought a dealership right next to the dealership I was at, and a dealership up the street, and some other expansion that they were doing. So what that means more land for Billy Walters. Very smart businessman. I mean, go watch that 60 Minutes interview and see how he makes his money. Not just through the sports gambling. Well, yeah, through the sports gambling, but not the sports gambling the way that you would think. But let's just say he's a cash cow now. Very interesting. But anyway, just want to throw that out there. Just some thoughts that came to mind. Hopefully, well, take from it what you will.
Jump, jump. If your energy is right, everybody shine your light. Coming in right at the.
And that concludes another session of Val's Monologue. Hope you enjoyed the story.
Let me slow down this record.
Again, if you want to find us, you can find us at Answer Game Podcast on Facebook. We also have an Instagram page at answer_game_podcast. If you want to get interviewed, if you have something interesting to say, contact us. All right, we're not too hard to find. And that is it. Y'all have a good one.
And you talking about niggas all up in the room, stop following the crowd. Think for yourself, my dude.